Time for Wine Talks with Paul K.
Fascinating story.
This is Robert Mondavi from the Michael Mondavi Winery.
I taste a lot of wine.
Having a conversation with Shark Tank, Kevin O'Leary.
Michael Silacci, Opus One Winery.
Incredible conversation with Dr. Mia Ruth.
No matter what, you're definitely going to feel better.
Sit back and grab a glass. It's Wine Talks with Paul K.
Hey, welcome to Wine Talks with Paul K. And we are in studio today in beautiful Southern California. About to have a conversation out in New Jersey with MJ Towler. Is it Towler or Towler?
It is Towler.
Towler. Okay, MJ Towler. Introductions in just a minute. Hey, Wine Talks is available on iHeartRadio, Pandora, Spotify, wherever you hang out for podcasting. And have a listen to a couple episodes I just released. I had Matthew Borges of Chateau Lagrange up at the, I think it's the Fourth Growth Bordeaux house. Unbelievable conversation. And what I thought was interesting was he is owned by corporate Japan. So he has free reign to do what he wants at the chateau and make sure he brings to the table the expression of Bordeaux that he wants. And it's an amazing conversation. I listened to that. He was in studio, actually. Another conversation with Marinella Ardelin, who is a PhD and a specialist in Romanian wine. And that conversation was really cool because I pulled out a newsletter from my father from 1981, and we spoke about Premier Sauvignon Blanc under the Soviet rule. So it's a really cool conversation, but not why we're here. Here to talk to MJ. Welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks, Paul. Thanks for having me.
Great to have you on. And you know, you call yourself the black wine guy, and we're going to peel that back a little bit. But interesting history in this trade. You just came from a tasting. You've been hanging around the wine trade for many, many years. What brought you here? That's the question. Why did you do this? That's great.
I mean, it's dumb luck is really how it happened. I ended up meeting through my college and grad school years. Ended up meeting a gentleman named John Capon, and John Capon, his family owns the oldest wine store in America. It's called Acker Wines. It's in the Upper West Side of New York. And when I met John, he wasn't really involved with the business. He wanted to be a hip hop producer. He had long hair all the way down his back, but he his father's like, okay, you're going to take over the business. And as he was taking over the business, we're friends. He reached out to me and said, hey, come work with me, and you'll drink the finest wines in the world on a nightly basis. And at that point, I was living in Philadelphia, and this was Philadelphia in the 90s. Not that, I mean, so I was like, yeah, let me get out of here. Let me go back. And I'm more of a New York guy. I grew up 40 miles from New York. So, I knew nothing about wine, but, a young man, 27, living in New York City, bright lights, big city, wine seemed pretty alluring. Yeah.
That's an interesting concept there because, you didn't know anything about wine. You weren't part of the wine trade. When I started with my father in '88, I did not consider the beverage. It was business for me. Mm-hmm. But something bites us, something comes around and you got kind of go, this is pretty cool stuff. Was this now on the floor? Were you working the floor at the store?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, so this was back when Acker was a family business. Mm-hmm. And they had done one wine auction. They tried to do one auction either early 90s or late 80s with his father, Michael. But John kind of saw this in the 90s, NewYork.com, lots of young guys with money coming in, wanting to get into wine. And he kind of was looking at the wine auctions. But I did start on the floor. I mean, I will tell this to people, and I've said it a lot during my podcast with all my guests and all my IG lives that wine education for me is a very interesting thing because I tell people I'm way overeducated and don't use my degrees. And then, for me, wine education on one level has become a commodity because when I started, the bug bit me just working on the floor. It was just so exciting. New York City, Upper West Side. We had a great clientele. But I had heard, that's the first time I heard about a master sommelier. And at that point, in 97, 98, there's maybe like 3 master sommeliers in the United States. Mm-hmm. Like it wasn't a lot. Like there were some, and there weren't a lot of sommeliers, but if you were, it was just the guy who knew the most about wine at the restaurant. That's right. I mean, I had Kevin Zraeli on. He ran the biggest wine program in the world, winners on the world, and he has no quote unquote formal wine education. He kind of started it in America with the Winners on Wine School. So it was for me. I was a bit of a know-it-all, and I was like, I could never know all this. Like it was just so exciting to and it's a beverage, right? But how can grapes taste like strawberries or blueberries or blackberries or bell peppers? Like it was those things that start, and then getting introduced to the concept of terroir and different soil types, and I was like, this is so freaking cool.
I want to ask you this. This is an interesting question. I just read a post on LinkedIn by a young girl who, I don't know, sometimes history repeats itself, and sometimes what we don't know kind of shrouds our opinion. But she thinks that wine academia needs to shift gears. It needs to change. It needs to be. I'm not sure I understand her point, but it does draw us over to the Master Somm, the Master of Wine, and the Diploma W set, which I think are important paths to academia in wine. They certainly don't teach us how to sell wine or understand consumerism necessarily. But how do you feel about the idea of using those as a path to wine knowledge?
Well, I think this is just me because of who I am.
Yeah.
Like if I'm interested in something, I'll go out and study it. I read, I actually have a law degree, Paul, and I've read more books outside, and there's a lot of reading law. So I read more books outside of law school on different topics than I did in law school because I was more interested in it. Right. So like I said, I've done a lot of things, and I stepped away from wine for a while. And at one point I worked in education, and I just saw these parallels. I'm like, wow, we push people to get degrees, but the degrees don't necessarily mean you have the skills to be in the field.
That's correct.
And so the point I want to finish, and it ties in this, it was like I've always said the best way to learn about wine, if you want to be in the wine business, go work wine retail, because that's where you'll learn the most, because you're dealing with wholesalers, you're dealing with customers, you're dealing with different tastes, you're understanding, you understand the business side, like, these vends, our floor stacks, that's our highest profit or whatever, or that's our loss leader. But you also learn you have to be able to deal with people. And I think that's what gets lost, because a lot of people have the wine education, but they have no people skills. This is a people business, right? You could be the most knowledgeable on Burgundy, but if you don't know how to conduct yourself on the floor of a restaurant, you're not going to make it as a sommelier, right? Like it's about personality. It's about reading people. It's about anticipating their needs. And that's not taught in any curriculum of any kind, in any school, not taught, medical school, law school. It's not taught, right? And so I think my objection, or my what gives me the willies is when you go on social media, it's like, wow, WSET2 wine educator, never worked in a wine store, never worked for a retailer, just decided I like wine. I could become a wine educator. I'm going to get this piece of paper that says I know more about wine than you, right? And so you should listen to me. And I'm generalizing, but there's a lot of, like, someone who's been in this and seen it evolve. Like everybody I worked with, like some of the most knowledgeable people, this, in the world in wine, have no credentials. They've just either grew up in it, their family had a store, or some people just love retail. And there's guys who've worked 30 years in retail and have taken all the trips to the Moselle, to Burgundy, to Bordeaux, and know way more than what you can learn in a level 2 or level 3 class, just because they have the on the ground experience. And that's just, I think that's something I just value in my life. That's how I learn, is by doing.
I think we call it the school of hard knocks.
Yeah.
Well, it's important. I think that's a good path. I think it's erroneous for people to think that they're going to jump into an MW or MS and get that 6-figure job. It used to be
right. That's it. Yeah. Yeah.
It doesn't happen anymore. And you can certainly read all you want. I have volumes of books here collected over the years through my father and myself, that you could read all of them and probably still not get the education you might on the field. Now, I learned that way. I learned like you do. by hearing it and by experiencing it. If I read it, I'll forget it like by the time I close the book. But if I'm working it and I'm having those conversations, but I still think it's an important path for some people to do this. And here's my romantic view. Maybe you agree with me. I have this romantic view of wine that, like, if there's no profit and it was just like produce the best thing you can produce because of the value of a glass of wine to our soul and then connects us to the earth and all the things that we talk about, and that's just not realistic, right? Right. You got to sell something, and it relies on us to do it. Our experience in our school of hard knocks. I have a master of wine client right now, and he told me the other day, I sent an email, I sold 0 bottles. I go, well, let me see your email. And I was like, oh my God, this is like atrocious, and your website's atrocious, and everything's just wrong about it. And even though you have this wonderful accolade as a very good friend, it's nothing to the world of selling a bottle. We need to do that. So when you were on the floor at Akron, just for the listeners, what's the name of your podcast so we get people to understand that?
Yeah, sure. Thanks for that. So the podcast, it's an interesting time. I don't know when it's going to air, but the podcast, I have over 150 episodes. Wow. But I'm changing the name. So there's like 3 episodes left. So right now it's called the Black Wine Guy Experience. You can find me on Instagram, I'm Black Wine Guy, but I'm changing the name to Beats, which indicates my love of music, Vines, and Life, because through the course of the interviews, one, that was what I wanted to name it originally, but then I listened to my producer, and she no, I like the Black Wine Guy. But I've had the opportunity to interview amazing people in the wine business, but then some of my favorite interviews, what I would call wine adjacent, right? So I've interviewed NBA players who are into wine or own wineries, like JJ Redick, who's an analyst now, big Burgundy lover, knew more about Burgundy than I did. Wow. Channing Frye owns Chosen Family in Oregon with Kevin Love. I've had Channing Frye on the podcast. Isaiah Thomas from the Detroit Bad Boys.
Oh yeah.
He owns Champagne House, Sherlin. And,
I did not know that. I went to school with Bill Lane Beer, his other nemesis.
Oh, did you? Wow. Yes. That's crazy.
I followed him actually.
But so like in all those we talked about, but like, learning, I'm here for the story. So like, I'm like, what's it like to be a McDonald's All-America? What's it like to win an NCAA championship? Right. Because we can, if you're even with winemakers, we can go to the website and download the tech sheet, and it'll tell us the bricks, the dates you started picking, the soil composition, the barrels you're using. That's information that's readily available. And one thing I've enjoyed was talking to people about their life. And so when I with the name the Black Wine Guy, I've had people like, well, I'm not really into wine. So I wanted to have fascinating conversation with fascinating people. Now, wine is ultimately the conduit, right? But if someone doesn't drink, like I've had guests who forgot to bring a bottle of wine, and so we didn't drink. It's not that we drink and we get all banged up. It's about sharing this beautiful beverage and getting the story. So yeah, so it'll be called Beats, Vines, and Life, and for people who already subscribed, when I change it, you'll get it notified. But yeah, and it's super exciting. I have a lot of great guests.
That's really.
I already have some episodes in can. Yeah,
we're having the same parallel problems. Wine talks is not always about wine. It's some pretty cool stuff, and some conversations that evolved well past that. And so now I'm struggling with the same idea. I have this wonderful. I have this idea that I want to produce conversations with stories of immigration success in America from all walks of life. And, there's some really incredible stories to tell. Like my wife's uncle who passed away, and I wasn't able to get him on the show before that, invented this straw that bends. I mean, this is an incredible story.
So right. That's the stuff I love. Yeah.
Do we start a new thing, or I haven't decided.
Well, if you just, that's what I did the research. When you rename it, it just changes in your RSS feed. So I want to keep all my content. But, it was just, and we said, I'll be frank, like, my podcast is in the top 10% when it comes to downloads, right? But like attracting sponsors by taking away wine, I think that opens up to lots of other sponsors who might think, well, I'm not in the wine, and put me more in the luxury category. I can go to Lexus, or I can go to Toyota, right? I can go to a bank, and they're not feeling like this guy's just drinking wine with people, right? Like he's actually having compelling conversations about life that people listen to.
That's a really good point. And you said something earlier, which is exactly right. And it's about the story, right? And I tell people the story can't be, whether it's wine or the conversation you have about life or basketball or whatever paths your guests are taking, but the story can't be, at least on the wine side, hey, I got this wine for $3.
Right.
It's not really a story.
Right.
But you have an NBA player who's making wine, who's interested in wine. You've got another NBA player who's an expert on Burgundy, which is an amazingly complex part of our industry.
Mm-hmm.
That's a pretty cool story to tell.
Right.
I think people want to be educated. They want to be entertained. They want to be inspired by these stories. And I think that's a brave move. So, how about the Black Wine Guy side of this? I'm going to be going to the African American Vendors Association event in Napa on Sunday. And
cool.
Yeah.
Say what's up to my girl, Angela.
Yeah, Angela McCray. She was on the show recently. And I reached out to the African American Vendors Association like in 2003 or something. I can't remember the last social problems that we had where this. And I wanted to put a wine in my club, and I was buying a lot back then. Not as much when I sold it, but I was buying a lot back then. And there were like 4 members or something, and now there's over 200.
Yeah, probably Mac Miller. I mean, it wasn't a lot. Yeah.
So, tell me about the headwinds. Have you had headwinds with the show because of the name and what you're doing? Because I'm trying to peel all of this back, and I want to have these.
Yeah, no, this is perfect. Thanks for that. I mean, no, I love this question. It's a joke. The Black Wine Guy is a joke because, like, when I started in the business. In 90, I mean, there still aren't a lot of Black people or people of color in this business, but like I would be the only Black guy there, right? And so, people don't understand everything has a long history. So political correctness did not start. It started a long time ago. And so people be like, there's this guy, he's from New York, he wears glasses, he went to law school, he's 5'10", like. And if you said, yeah, who's a Black dude from New York? I then it's like, oh, MJ, right? Like, so when I started in the vertical or the niche of wine or on Instagram, I went on and I was looking at people had all these crazy names like Texas Wino with EAU and some of the names that I saw the Black people have were like Noir Wino, Chocolate Som, blah blah blah. And I'm like, what are you guys idiots? Black wine guy. Like I was the wine guy who was Black, right? So it's really tongue in cheek, right? But to your point, yeah, there were people who, when they followed me, I think some people started following me. They thought I was going to be Black Wine Guy, like John Carlson, Tommy, like Black Wine Guy. We need more like fighting to bring down the wine-tocracy. And so I think a lot of people unfollowed me because they weren't satisfied with the Blackness of the content, or people like, why don't you feature more people of color in your podcast? Because I'll have like 20 episodes, right? And so the reason why I did so it's really tongue in cheek. I mean, I was at the Vignes event last week in New York. And I'm in the seminar, and it's a bunch of journalists. And there's like me and another Black guy, or he might have been Indian American, but he's browner than me. But and I'm like, and so for me, it's like it's just funny. Like you could just say, who was the Black dude at the taste, and I'm not going to be offended, right? So I think more people are offended by it. They take it the wrong way.
What do you think?
Than just tongue in cheek.
I mean, it's an intimidating subject. By any means for everybody. And, even women in wine is a subject that's very sensitive right now. And it's they've gone to maybe 25% of the winemakers now are women when it was, that's taken 20, 30 years for that to happen. And now it looks like, 1% of wineries are Black owned. but still, it's a slow moving industry anyway. You only get one time a year to try your
Yeah.
trade. But is it because of the aristocracy, the general aristocracy of wine, that you think the headwinds were there originally for people of color? Or?
No, actually, I mean, I've talked about this because to me, it's similar to the conversation going around. Young people don't drink wine. Well, most people don't start drinking wine until they're over 30 as it is, unless their family owns a store. Because after 30, you're either married or you are making more money and you're not going out drinking and doing Jaeger shots and pounding pitchers of beer with your boys, right? And so, and I've said this before. So when you understand, like when you look at wine, the issue with wine is it costs a lot of money to make wine. I don't think people understand how much it costs to produce wine, right? Particularly here in the United States, it costs a lot of money to produce wine. And so, and that just is what it is. I don't know how you fix the fact what land costs in Napa or Sonoma. You can't. So who has that money? A lot of rich dudes, a lot of rich white dudes in America, right? But you look at it though, right? So that's what when people talk about, oh my God, the diversity, like I'm like, well, no. And I said to Channing, I said, Channing, bro, you played in the NBA, man. You're a freaking multimillionaire, man. You're a rich dude who's making wine. That's what it is. Yeah. Rich dudes, rich people. Some rich people like to make wine. Doesn't matter what the color is, right?
That's right.
And so, really and then also when you're younger, and I said, and in the podcast I had with Channing, I said, come on. I said, man, listen. If you got $30, you're gonna buy the 1.75 of E&J. You're not gonna buy a bottle of wine and share with your boys. It just the economics of it. Because I think a lot, as I love wine, I geek out, Paul, and I'm sure you do. But like I have a good friend who's a winemaker, says it'll get you drunk, right? So if you're drinking to get drunk, you're not, and you have limited funds. It's not like, oh my God, we need to try this Trousseau from the Jura. Guys, listen, right. Just if we all put in. There's 5 of us. We're all put in $10. It's 44 with 10. It's 47 with 10. We're gonna enjoy. We're all get a glass. We're not gonna be drunk, but we're gonna enjoy this wine. So it's not. I say people think it's not a race thing. It's a class thing. That's the biggest thing in America. People understand we have classism in America, and then certain people fall within that, disproportionately. But if you have the money, you ascend that. People ascend that. That's why you do see people. Or timing, right? So like Mac out and, he got into Sonoma when it was cheap. There's times when you could have gotten the wine business when it was cheap, right? Now it takes millions of dollars, right? Depending on what, and hold on, let me be honest. And to be fair, depending on what you make, you can go buy some bulk juice, have a label, slap your label on it, and say that you're a winemaker, which a lot of people do, right? Mm-hmm. Of all colors, races, and creeds. So, but it really is just, it's the cost of entry would be the headwind. And for me personally, people I didn't, because of where I worked at Acker at such a prestigious store, mm-hmm. people like he must know his wine. I was never looked down on because people assumed they would not put a guy on the floor who couldn't handle this.
That's true.
So that was, I think, opened a lot of doors for me. Like if you're in the wine business, most people know that store, right? There's younger generation that doesn't know, but old, like most people know that store for infamy or for fame, but like most people know that store.
I think for the listeners to know that Acker was there's a handful of stores that made really the wine industry, the retail wine industry in America, and they all were in New York. I like to say my dad's store in the 70s was an important one for Los Angeles, and it was one of the top 5. But the stores in New York were clearly the trendsetters of the wine pace in the 70s and 80s. So Acker was one of them, and it's an accolade. But actually, it's one of those retail stores that it actually is a resume prominent thing to put on your resume that you.
Oh yeah, no, like people go, whoa, you worked at Acker? Like that's how people, treated me,
But you said something earlier, which I think is really important. I think what you say is really brilliant, actually, because I've never thought of it that way, that the cost of entry into this, we all know, is expensive. You and I could never go to Napa and spend $1 million a planted acre and then expect to sell wine. I mean, just brand building. I think, and of all the industries of all the world, brand building is probably the toughest. Maybe it's this, salad dressing and toothpaste, because you're up against Procter and Gamble and Paul Newman. Pretty different. Wine is probably up there. I think I just read an article, there's over 1 million brands at any given time on the marketplace between Europe and America. And I think the TTB approved 180,000 new labels last year. And going to your point about, buying bulk juice. Yeah. For the listeners, you and I could start a winery tomorrow. We go find some juice from Chiretti or one of those suppliers, send it to my winery where my license hangs, bottle it up. And then that's great. Now we've got, 10 pallets sitting somewhere with nobody buying it, but, we were able to make it. But I think part of what you're saying when you're talking about buying, $30 and you're going to buy a, 1.75 an E&J brandy is, I think every generation eventually comes around, at least this percentage of a generation will come around and say, gee, there's something really cool and ethereal about this glass of wine, and seek the knowledge of it. And potentially they're not going to geek out like we have and had to learn and figure this out. But I think that's why wine's been here for 12,000 years or 6,000 years. And I mean, it's not going away. You can put it in a can if you want, or put it in a Tetra Pak, or you can add flavors, but I don't think it's going away.
Yeah, it's not going away. I mean, another thing I said before, I was like, whatever, religious or not, the first book ever printed was the Bible.
That's right.
And there's only one alcoholic beverage in it, and it's wine.
Yeah. And I actually calculated once while I was at church, and the pastor was talking about that story. It was years ago, and I looked up in the Bible. I think it was the back, and there was this equation for that vessel, whatever the vessel was that they turned the water into wine. And so I calculated the gallonage. I applied the current formula I used to use for flying a wedding, and I determined there were 3,500 people at the wedding.
That's awesome. That's so cool.
And it kind of jives because those weddings were like 2 or 3 days, and there's a whole village.
Oh yeah.
So I told the pastor afterwards, he's like, what are you talking about? Why would you bring that up?
He's like, that's what you took away from the sermon. Great. Thanks.
Yeah.
Appreciate that, Paul.
So I want to move into that conversation about cans and Tetra Paks and these kinds of alternatives. I've had many people on the show that feel like they've invented something new by a single serve. And, we know that at Acker, you sold, 187s and 375s all day long of different wines. So single serve's not a new thing. Packaging options aren't a new thing. They come and go. But when you were selling on the floor of Acker, how have you sensed the consumerism has changed? I mean, we know it's changed a lot, but what were those conversations like when people walked into that store?
So this is 1997, and there's a lot of money in New York. The .com bubble is in full effect, and and this is, Paul, that's what I learned, and people, and I think sometimes a customer gets offended because they don't understand. This is Michael Capon's over the best question you ask. You're very nice. Welcome. What are you looking for? And then you say, how much would you like to spend today? Because our whole thing was, we want to give you the best bottle of wine for what you want to spend, right? So, and people are, and so, at Acker, it could range, Upper West Side of New York, it could range from people wanting to spend, back then, like 97, like, I don't know if you remember Protocolo, but Protocolo was like $2.99 a bottle, and it was so good. I think Protocolo is $5.99 a bottle now. It's a Spanish wine, but we would have, we'd have our, there's so many solid bottles of wine historically in the 10 to 15 range. So that's why you ask, but sometimes people, would be like, it's a special occasion. What do you think is the best? And you have to go into there's no best. What do you like? Type conversation. But we were a store. I won't correct. We didn't sell 187s. We did have splits because of good wine, but like New York was very different. You couldn't sell beer back then in the street. It was just wine
Wine.
and liquor.
Yeah.
And we didn't even sell a whole lot of liquor. Like we were, I mean, we were hardcore. We had like, we'd have, if we had Absolute Vodka, it was $4 more because we didn't buy the 100 case deal that all the liquor stores, the package stores would buy, right? So people were like, and we would have it in case someone's going to a party, they want to get a bottle of champagne and grab some vodka. But we would tell, we had no problems. Like, it's cheaper down the street, man. We don't sell liquor. Like, we sell wine, right? So that was I think was an interesting conversation with people. Like, you don't have Johnny Walker Blue? No, we don't, because we don't sell. Not what we do.
But was it educated clients? Were they looking for first growth Bordeaux's? Were they looking for just solid quality wines? The internet has changed so much with the consumerism. It's a freaking whack out there right now. So everybody's looking for a price, and I'm just wondering if they came looking for an experience.
I think when people came to Acker, they were coming looking for an experience, right? It was a destination. It was a well-known store. It was known for being high end. I think people came. I've been in there now. People get mad. Like people go mad. Like people would go into Acker. I was there a couple months ago, and people were like, you don't have Josh? No, man, they don't sell Josh. Like, why? Like, what are you talking about?
The store's still there.
The store is still there, man.
Didn't one one of the big ones went out recently, didn't it?
That was Morel's.
Morel, yeah.
They, because that becomes an issue with what's that called? It is called, yes, it's called venture capital.
Uh-huh.
So some guys who liked wine, bought bought in.
Yeah.
And you know what they're doing?
I have found over the years, and this is my 35th year, that this whole business is about the passion. Whether you're making it, wholesaling it, serving it as a somm, working behind a bar, much like food hospitality, it's all about the passion, because you wouldn't do it.
Yeah.
You can't apply masters of business school lessons. You can't apply maybe what you learned at Coca-Cola beverage to the wine business.
Right. I agree. Because it's so emotional. And, and I think I've said this before to get myself in trouble, but I think I've said before, a lot of people who are in the you go to some of these bigger corporations, they don't even like wine. It's just that, at that level, they're the spreadsheet readers, right? And they're looking for margins. But like, if you're on the floor, if you're front facing with people, you got to love it. Mm-hmm. You got to love it.
And to put it in the bottle.
Oh my God. And those people, I mean, the people who make wine, I've interviewed I interviewed a vineyard manager, Ruben Solorzano, Mexican descent. And I interviewed another cellar master a few weeks ago. And when Ruben works for Stoltman Vintners, Vineyards rather, up in Santa Barbara.
Yeah. And
the son, Peter, realized like none of the vineyard workers drank wine. Like, they drank tequila. Like they weren't connected to it. He didn't like that. He's like, no, you didn't understand what the joy this brings people. So they end up creating a whole program where Ruben and the it's called Quadrillo, the squad. They created a label for them. They're half owners with the Saltman. And I think that's great, that type of thing, because we don't have an industry without people doing back-breaking work, cold as hell at night, picking grapes, cutting themselves. I mean, I said, you guys, you want to make some money, call the harvest diet, right? And you can invite civilians in, and in 30 days, they'll lose 30 pounds just from working. Right?
That's very funny. Well, you said something very important. like you and I could go buy juice, and we could tell them that it's not enough acid. They throw some acid in there, a little more grape sugar in there, a little more color, and you obviously docked up this wine and you put it on the market. But what you're talking about, breaking your back in the freezing cold, cutting your fingers, trying to pick the grapes so that they're at the right time for the right, vinification, so that when we produce this bottle of wine, it really shows that we did that. Right? You can't put that in a bottle with the chemical, the back-breaking harvesting.
No,
it doesn't. They don't have a chemical for that. So this in Stolman is a great conversation to lead into this idea of they're very organic. They're very on I think they even have a biodynamic farm. How is that for that industry in your side of things? Do you see an organic movement, the biodynamic, people asking for it? Do they ask, hey, MJ, what do you think about, organic wines? Or this hasn't really, certainly it's popular, but it's not a huge.
Yeah. That's a great question. I think it's more, I've seen more around the conversation of, what is it called? Natural wine, which is an ambiguous term, right? Yeah. There is definitely, the organic wine is an interesting thing. And what I tell people when they're asking for things like organic wine, et cetera, and so on, I'm like, first of all, you need to understand it's not as rare as you think. I said, but there's tons of people who make organic and biodynamic wines. They don't label them that way because that's not how they're trying to sell their wine. So my thing becomes, are you trying to make the best wine? Are you doing it because you want to make the best wine possible? Or are you doing it because it's gimmicky, right? Like Michel Chapoutier, wines are biodynamic. Been to biodynamic for decades. Yeah. He doesn't go he goes out and then people, this also score. People hate it. Goes out and gets a 99 for his Les Milles and it's $200 a bottle. Now you take that, somebody asks for an organic bottle, they want an organic $15. Right? So you go, how, and they always go, I love a question, how much did you spend? Oh, not a lot. And I've had to say, well, I've worked with people who not a lot is $200.
I lost you. There you go.
Yeah.
It's kind of interesting because particularly with European winemakers I've had in here, they're going to look, my kid is playing in that vineyard. And so I don't want them tracking in chemicals and pesticides, herbicides. Yeah. And I think you're right. I think it's not as rare as people might think because it's now popular and you can put the green leaf on the back of the label and all that. But really, wasn't all wine organic up until, let's say, the 40s when we started throwing the crap into the vineyard? And
essentially, right. I mean, in Europe, old vines is the way to go. Natural, not natural, organic, because they didn't have, it's when chemicals, World War II chemicals, things happen, and we come in and we do what we do as Americans and hey, this will help you do this. I mean, right. Look at the problems they have with Burgundy, right? And they've worked to fix that. But yeah, it wasn't. It's actually more common than people actually know. Bottom line.
I think many. I had a customer call me very angry in my organic club when I had it. And she said, you didn't send me an organic wine. I said, no, it's organic. She goes, no, it's not. It doesn't have the green leaf on the back. I said, no, but it's organic. The winemaker has been making organic wines long before the green leaf even existed. And she's like, no, I want a green leaf wine.
Right.
Okay, so I had to send her green leaf. And the other problem that bothered me, and maybe you had the same experience, was when it became popular, or at least, commercial, a lot of it was bad. It just kombucha.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And there was no excuse for that except to say, I'm drinking organic wine, so I'm going to put up with it. And I don't think that's necessary.
It's not. That's a great point, right? Especially with natural wine, like someone said, I saw a meme on Instagram that was actually beautiful, and it was a comedian. I don't know if he was a wine guy or whatever, but he said, he's like, so orange wine, essentially, you didn't finish making the wine. I can't believe I fell for that shit for 3 years.
That's funny.
Yeah, I was like, that's hilarious, right? Yeah. And natural wine is, and I've said this a lot. I'm like, I remember 7th grade science class. We had to learn the periodic table of the elements. Sulfur is a naturally occurring compound. How's that not natural? It's natural. It occurs naturally.
I think that argument's a very strong and valid argument. And people don't realize that they go to Sizzler, they're going to get more sulfites in the meal than they're getting in a bottle of wine.
Oh my God. Yeah. Somebody I saw it on Verve Wine. They did a post about, there's more sulfites in dry fruit, raisins, way, like off the charts more, like you said. And when you eat processed food, oh, good Lord, it's filled with things worse than sulfites.
I just want people to, those are good stories and good, important information for people to hear on a podcast like this, that when they go to the market, particularly these days, a floor stack of Yellowtail and Josh. And, here's something that was very disturbing to me. And even though they're my friends, the people that make Stella Rosa, the number one SKU through the organization that tracks all this stuff for December was the pineapple chili flavored Stella Rosa.
Oh, good. Yeah, I know. Oh my God.
Can you imagine that?
Oh my God. It is very distressing. It's super distressing. Another post, a good friend of mine, Adam Howard Lee, who was Siduri, now he's Clarice Wine Company. He did a post on his Instagram, and it was the number one selling Pinot Noir in the world, Naomi.
Yeah.
And he said, and he's like, in one bottle of Naomi, there's more residual sugar in one bottle of Naomi where there are in 21 of his similarly priced Pinot Noir.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow. Okay, let's talk about that. I mean, let's face it. I tell this story all the time. In fact, you can't really see, but here's a photograph of my dad.
Okay.
1975 in the wine shop, and we sold Matus and Lancers, and there was Gallo Riesling. Those things were all slightly sugared up, but nothing like today. But when he stopped at Sutter Home in 1974 and talked to Bob Trincaro, and he brought out this white wine, this pink wine, and it was accidentally arrested fermentation.
Yep.
And he's asking my dad what to do with it, and it brought, they call them entry-level wines, formula wines. It brought people to the table. And I suppose we, as wine geeks or wine aficionados or wine enthusiasts, let's call them, kind of have to deal with that, because people that weren't drinking wine might enjoy one of those and then realize, maybe after a little while they go, geez, and they taste something else. Now they're in the funnel, teaching them some other things. So it's kind of important to have those, but there's so many.
Oh, yeah. I mean, yeah. Yeah. I've heard the White Zinfandel story, and I think what happened was his wife grabbed it and literally it was soccer moms, right? And they were there, and his wife's like, you better sell that, right? Like the flip side of White Zinfandel, and I say this all the time. Once I got in the wine, learned about it very quick. White Zinfandel helped preserve a lot of old vine Zinfandel.
Yeah,
right.
That's true. Yeah.
So grateful for that.
Yeah.
However,
really good point.
And even when I learned too, Ian J. Gallo, Hardy Burgundy, that was like old vine field blends. Like it was just, so it was actually really good wine, but it
was.
But that being said, now it's become, Taco Bell had a wine. I don't know who it was. Maybe it was Barefoot had a Oreos cookie and cream wine. There's things that don't go together.
My dad used to put the Gallo Hardy Burgundy in his blind tastings on Tuesdays, and sometimes it would do really well.
I know, mess people up, right?
And I have a funny story with Barefoot. Mike Houlihan came to my office. I just started with my dad in 1989. They had just taken on this 40,000 gallons of wine that was a debt. And he came to me. He says, I've got this wine. We're going to call it Barefoot Cellars. We're going to call it the Chateau Lafite, FEET of California. And I go, he was a hyper dude anyway, still is. And I called my dad from the office. I go, you won't believe this guy just came in here. It's the stupidest thing I've ever heard. You're called Chateau Lafite. I mean, how ridiculous. And then it goes on to be the biggest brand in America. So I was wrong about that. But what's next? What's next for MJ? What besides you're renaming your podcast, which I think is a brilliant idea. Actually, I'm going to consider that myself. What's next for you? What are you working on?
Yeah, thanks for asking. So what has emerged and it came out of I had on guess my podcast were Dottie and John Dorothy and John Gaither, who were the wine writers for Wall Street Journal for like 12 years. And they had came on my podcast. Wonderful guests. And after the show, they're like, MJ, this was amazing. Like, you're a really great interviewer. They're like, we've been on Good Morning America, the Today Show, all these shows numerous times. And so they wrote an article about me. And when they wrote an article, it was like, what makes a great interview? And I realized that I had a talent for this. And like I said, and I don't know if we had started the recording, but for me, it's the stories, extracting the stories. So what I really want to have happen is use wine the way or alcohol the way Bourdain used food, to have a show where I'm traveling around and meeting people and getting really great stories about people, local music, cuisine, food, philosophy. That's I am working with a production team on that. We put together our first sizzle. We have our deck. We're talking with people, and we're looking to raise the funds to get to do a pilot, because I think it would be a lot of fun. I've been blessed. I'm very lucky in life. I think I've fallen into some really good shit, for lack of a better term, and I look at my life and, I got a friend who's a Harlem Globetrotter right now, Paul. It's like my life is just weird. Like I know 100. No, actually, Sweet Lou Dunbar's son.
Sweet Lou Dunbar.
His son, Louis Dunbar Jr. is now a Globetrotter, and I'm friends with him. And I know 100 Point winemakers, and then I know Harlem Globetrotters. Right?
That's awesome.
And so
sizzle reel on the show.
Yeah. Really so that is really what when you and even the big strike in Hollywood, even you talk about monetization, even that's tough, but I just love doing it. And then, and if I could, if I could wake up and know that I'm going to have conversations with really interesting people and help them tell their story and introduce people to, in my opinion, like we talked about the barefoots, and they're like, but like, no, you know what, man, seriously, even if you have $20, spend $5 more, or don't buy that Josh Reserve, and you're actually, this is someone who really lives for what they're putting forth for you, right?
Tom Hinman, that's his name. He was the winemaker for Mao Ying Mao. Wait a minute.
Yeah, Yao Ming. Yeah. I've had Yao Ming's wine. It was very good.
Very good.
Actually, no. I had his wine. Was it his? I think I've had his. Does he make wine? I know he makes a Napa, but I think I've had his wine from China, and I was kind of blown away. Yeah.
The only Chinese wine I've had was some off-brand years ago, and I had I got the taste of the new Lafite.
Mm-hmm.
But Tom Hinman told me that I use quote all the time. I think it's a great quote, because he says, I meet the most amazing people, I drink the most amazing wine, I have the most amazing food, and I go to amazing places. I don't make a lot of money, but I get to do all that.
Right.
I think that's pretty profound, actually. I can deal with that, I can deal with that.
Absolutely.
Well, we're at 50 minutes, and that's kind of the budget. So I really appreciate your time, and I hope we can do this again, because we have a lot to talk about.
Hey, I would love to come back, man. This was great. I was kind of laughing when you sent the email. Like, I'm like, dude, you'll see once you listen. Like, this is what I live for, right? Like, I don't get nervous. We're just two guys talking, and that's what I tell people. I tell people it's not an interview. We're gonna have a conversation. Like,
exactly.
When I deal with PR people, I'm like, bro, you need to go listen to a podcast, because I don't have I don't have 25 questions to hand you, because I'm gonna listen to who I'm sitting there with. I'm going to find a way to connect with them and really draw out something that's never been shared before.
You know, I always get the same question. Can you send me talking points? I'm worried, especially this Romanian woman who, you know, and I'm like, I'll write you some talking points, but I guarantee you, we're not going to touch them. We're going to get somewhere else, you know. And that's very cool. And I wish you success in what you're doing. And it really, when you will let a few months pass, see some action, some other things going on, we'll get back together. We'll have
absolutely. And you know, listen, I intend to come do something in LA. I got lots of friends in LA.
Oh, great.
I'll let you know. We'll get together. We'll drink some wine. Some cool people.
And have some dinner.
And we can do it in the studio. And that's I'm grateful that we could do this, but that's also been a hallmark of my show. 95% of them in the studio, real life, sharing the same bottle. I've turned down big names because I'm like, no, I'm not. And now I'm like, should I have turned them down? But
yeah, you know, that's a tough call, right? You want you need the content, but then you'd rather have it. You know, it's much better when you're together. So
yeah.
But it felt very natural today, and I really appreciate the time.
Thank you so much. It was great.
Together,
and we got to do it again.
Success.
Thanks, Paul.
So we're not going to see you at the Triple AV then, I suppose.
No.
Napa.
No. Actually, I might be. Is that the one in May? At the end of May?
It's actually March is this weekend. Is it this weekend? The 10th. It's the 9th and the 10th.
Okay.
With Angela and
oh yeah, no, I'm not making it out to that for this. So yeah, but tell Angela you interviewed me and hi, I love Angela. No, I'm not gonna make it out. I got a bunch of stuff I'm doing at the end of this month and stuff I'm doing in April. Still got to deal with this day job stuff. So until I get free,
you know, I think we'd have fun. You know, kind of a dual host if we end up in Napa together. When I go to Napa, I just book like 6 podcasts so I get it done and have some, you know, content in reserve and something in the can, right? And we probably have a lot of fun.
Oh, definitely. We're Paul. You know,
that would work.
You're one of the funner interviews I've had, man.
That would work. I think
good rapport.
We would ham and egg it. Anyway, I appreciate the time.
My pleasure.
See you next time.
Take care.